Recording in progress.
Yes, thank you, Harrison.
Yeah, the badge.
Well, good morning and welcome to the qathet Regional District Committee of the Whole for December the 18th. Don't let me forget to acknowledge that the meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Next, you have the agenda in front of you. We have discussion?
Yes, sorry. I'm looking at item 6.1, and since it seems to be of the nature of land and stuff like that, I would request that be moved to the entire discussion.
All right. Vargas? Thank you, Chair. Okay, you can move it. I'll provide the 11. Okay. Is there consensus and is there make a motion? Okay, well, you'll move it anyway, just here, and Director Lennox, you're seconding. Any discussion on moving item 6.1 to close to the informal meetings? Okay, no further discussion, all in favor? So now we are on adoption of the minutes of November 27th. Are there errors or omissions? Seeing no hands, a motion to approve the minutes, please. Director Gifford, Director Lennox, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We have one delegation, and I'd like to welcome Pinky Vargas from the Public Services Transport. So thank you for being here, Pinky. And you're going to make a presentation, and you have 10 minutes. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I'm Pinky Vargas and from Republic Services, and I manage the government accounts for Washington and British Columbia. And also I have joining with me Jim Hutchinson, who is our area director of municipal sales, and Jeff Barcinas, who is our general manager. Jeff is in transit, so he's just on the phone, so you won't see him, but Jim is gonna be with me in the presentation today. So let's see if you can, I need to share my screen. Here we go, share screen. And, okay, are you seeing the presentation?
Not yet.
Not yet? No? Is it up? No?
We do have copies in our agenda package, but
Is a little different because I could not get the entire presentation to download. So let me just try this again. Apologies. I'm trying to let's see what.
oh, something's happening.
Okay, hold on. Let me try that again. Let's see.
See it.
Yay.
It's all good. It's in not full screen presentation.
Okay, yeah. Let's see if we can fix that. Please practice as much as you can, and then when it happens, you
Me too.
come on, little buddy, work with me. Why aren't we?
Focusing. Yeah.
Oh, for goodness sakes, why aren't we working?
Because you needed to.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
For goodness sakes, on my other screen it's showing the full presentation, but on yours it is not.
Mm-hmm.
Let me share one more time. Apologies. I'm so sorry. I'm almost using up half of my 10 minutes already. Yeah. Oh.
Do that, Dave.
For goodness sakes.
Hey, there we go.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ooh, just went back. It won't move to another one.
You guys are
Do you
good.
have a full screen or no?
No,
It just reverted back to the other
Oh,
one.
for goodness
it-
sake.
it's it's fine.
Fine.
We can see it. You're good.
Okay, all right. My apologies. Okay, so we are Public Services. I'm gonna start my timer now. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So I just wanted to say how much we appreciate our partnership. We have been serving qathet Regional District for 14 years, since 2010. We transport for you about 7,200 tons per year of municipal solid waste. And the good thing is for you guys is you know that it does go to Roosevelt, which is a modern day landfill, and it has 97% gas recovery sent to the PUD. So you are being very environmentally responsible. And we just want you to know that we appreciate the opportunity to serve you. So I did get to tour the RRC with Jason. And so I just wanted to say that I was so impressed. You should be very proud, because it is an absolutely beautiful transfer station. And I am in a lot of transfer station, and I wear a lot of PPE, and this is one of the nicest I've ever seen. The use of recovered materials and the way you made it a community center, it is definitely something to be proud of. So that is the wrong direction. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Jim. And Jim's going to talk a little bit about Republic Services.
You're welcome.
Here.
Are you there, Jim?
He's a little.
Jim?
He's not muted, but we can't hear anything.
No, we can't hear him.
We got to enable his mic. It's happened to me also. Yeah. Start talking away. We usually give you quite a long time.
Jim, we can't hear you.
Nope.
No? Okay. All right. You know what? Here we go.
Yeah.
Just wanted to give you a little bit of oversight of who we are. So we are in 47 states in the US and 2 provinces. And we have 250 plus markets. So we have everything from landfills to compost to hauling, and we do hazardous waste. And we have one of the 5th largest fleets in the country, which we are working on getting them all to be moving over to EVs, but we use a lot of natural gas to power them. So we're very cognizant of how we operate our facilities. To let you know, we have very huge sustainability goals for 2030, and we work with a lot of municipalities around their climate action plans and ensuring that we're integrating what we can and doing as many things, sustainability and focusing on diversion, circularity. And one of the things we're doing for circularity right now is we opened our very first polymer center so we can recycle plastics back from Coke bottles back into Coke bottles. So we're just trying to do as much as we can to contribute and help our municipalities and our planet. Like I said, we are trying to match as much of our climate action goals with a lot of the municipalities' goals, because we know you have a lot that you're trying to achieve in your local districts. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is our municipal partners, and because we live our core values, which is safe, committed to serve, environmentally responsible, driven, and human-centered. So I wanted to go a little bit of a local approach right here, and I know that this is quite a complicated process, so seeing if this could give you a little bit of overview. So it starts at the RRC. and then it is trucked down to the barge, and then it gets on the barge, and then when it gets to Vancouver, it gets on another truck that takes it over to the intermodal. That one's a shorter one, and then it gets on the rail. And then when it arrives on the rail at Roosevelt Landfill, then it goes up a 5-mile hill into the landfill by truck. So it does have a lot of touch points. However, what I want to say about that is you should feel comfortable with the sustainability, because rail is one of the lowest emitters that there is, and most of your transport is done on rail, and all the methane that is captured from our landfill is used by the qathet PUD to power local homes. So it goes a long ways, but it is a lot less emissions than sending it by trucks and wear and tear on the roads. I wanted to give you an example of how our customer range is in Washington and British Columbia. So our largest customers, they're doing over 700,000 tons a year. And then the smaller range, about 1,200, comes from Alaska. So know that you're in the range, and there are quite a few. We serve customers of all sizes. So one of the things that we wanted to let you know is this industry has affected all of these customers. So a lot of them have also received price increases of about 30% this year. So whether they're big or small, we're all in the same boat right now. And part of that is because there have been incredible changes in the industry over the last couple of years that have all affected more changes in the last 5 years in this industry than in a long, long time. And just to give you a little bit of overview of those, some of them, of course, China sword started everything. COVID-19, the pandemic, changed so many things about labor availability, all at cost, all of those things. And then, of course, everybody looking to make sure that they are meeting as many of their environmental commitments as possible. So locally, I wanted to show you how this kind of really affects you guys. So the supply chains have been extremely affected in regards to getting parts, getting access, fuel increases across the board for everyone. The price of steel has, in some places, doubled. So that means our containers are made out of steel, and obviously our parts, and we're on the rail and all of those things. But then intermodal costs. So just to give you an example, our lease with the Port of Vancouver in the Surrey Intermodal, it went up 25% this year, and they also implemented tariffs. So at almost like $2 a ton. So that's just getting it on the rail. So all of these things are really adding up. And unfortunately, that does mean that there are, that does start to affect the costs in regards to the contracts and how they were, a lot of them were implemented many, many years ago before a lot of these changes came in. And now we're having to right size those contracts because in order to be able to serve our customers and be able to do business properly. So I wanted to go over with you the pricing that we have offered for qathet Regional District. And we know that it is very, very challenging in regards to managing municipal governments. I will tell you, I was a city council person for 8 years, so I know how tough that is, and I know that's a huge responsibility to balance your budgets and to explain to your taxpayers where their dollars are going. So we want to be as cognizant as we can in regards to understanding your municipal needs. But just wanted to say that, so there are two options. One is a standalone increase, and right now to get that contract so it's right size would be a 26% increase for this year, and I know that that's a heavy lift. Some of our contracts went up like 35% this year, so we know that's really tough. But what we wanted to do is see if we could give you an option and try and split that increase over for 2 years. So if you did, then we would split that and do only a 15% increase this year, and then do another 15% next year. So that can hopefully help mitigate a little bit of the cost in regards to your expenses and your budgets for this year. So I just want
Pinky,
oh, you
and
can.
Pinky, thank you very much for adjusting as we've dealt with these technical difficulties. And for the commission, I just wanted to add a couple comments for Pinky to know that she's got not only her own support on the local work that she does with you, but also the national support. As many of you may not be aware, Republic Services is a national firm. We're currently in 47 states, and we realize the things that Pinky has outlined are impacts, not only just on the local front, but also on the national and international front. We provide services in 47 states as well as 2 provinces. And these impacts are never easy for us to shift out, and they're never easy for commissions to work. So we do hope that we can find a way to continue our partnership. And I do know that that option 2 is one that we worked hard through, but we do believe it's the appropriate thing, given the partnership that we have had for so many years, to try and alleviate some of that big, huge increase as much as we possibly can. So we thank you for your consideration. I will turn it back over to Pinky to wrap it up. I know we've only got about 30 seconds left, but thank you for indulging us on our technical difficulties and for providing this opportunity to continue our partnership.
Thank you.
So,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for the opportunity. And we, let's see, I might have stopped sharing there. So that, all right, so I think you've taken over the screen. I just wanted to let you know that we are here to open any questions, anything that you want to know, deep dive further on. We're here to, our team is here to do that, and just let you know that we are the same team that has been working together for quite a few years and very familiar with working with the QRD.
Thank you very much, Pinky. Your presentation has really been helpful in explaining a lot of things to me. And there are questions from directors, beginning with Director Lennox and Director Elliott.
Thank you, and don't worry about the technical difficulties. It seems like every meeting I'm in, we work through something, and appreciate you laying out where your organization is. My question is really, we're looking at a 1 or 2 year option. It's pretty clear what we're talking about. We'll be debating that later. You have a large organization. What are your financial folks going to be presenting us in 2 years from now?
You know, that is
see where my question's headed there.
Yeah. Let me answer that question for you too, because one of the things that we do have, and I think some of the conversations we've been having with a number of municipalities throughout, is changes in how we deal with PI structure on an annual basis. Typically for disposal, in a very regrettable sense, we've been working on CPI charges, CPI all items, and in the last couple of years that may have looked good, but when you have long-term contracts, they're really not, because they just don't keep up with inflation of the events. And so that's what we're looking at. In 2 years, I think it is safe to say, if we can come to some negotiations on what an appropriate PI is going forward, we can try and alleviate some of this. But the nice part about it is taking this increase here at this time at least gets you up into that market rate standpoint that overcomes the PI problems that we've had in years past. So I'm cautiously optimistic, not knowing what's going to happen in 2 years. I'm cautiously optimistic that this will kind of get you in the right size. And then if we can have a good PI discussion about what appropriate PI is in future years, then we'll be able to know that better. I think it's also important to know for Republic Services, as you notice, I mentioned that we're in 2 provinces today in Canada. That's relatively new for us, and we are looking to try and expand that. And so that may change a lot of what we do up in Canada. So without a really clear crystal ball, I can't answer your question directly, but we're doing a number of things that I think will help move things in the right direction.
Thank you. Just Chair, maybe you could define for folks that might be watching PI.
Sure, I apologize. That's a price. That's the annual price increase mechanism that we use in our contracts.
Thank you.
And typically they're based upon the consumer price index. which is really not indicative of the industry. We usually prefer, rather than a CPI all items, it's more appropriate to use like a water, sewer, trash type index for these opportunities.
Good, thank you. Director Elliott.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first being that, do you have a sense of whether the proposed tariff increase would impact your service to us? And then I'll wait for the second one.
Yeah, so I will tell you that like you, we are looking for other options to make it affordable for our customers. So with the new tariffs, with the increased, we are looking for other options. So in 2 years, we might have something different to present to you. So we are looking at, like Jim said, other things in British Columbia to expand, and looking at different ways that we can support and deliver and transport for our customers at a more affordable rate. So we were surprised. We have to take the increase, but we are looking for other options and other solutions.
Yeah, and the tariff did impact. I mean, that is part of the existing, that's part of the increase that we're asking for today, and that's part of what we had to take into account. And so any future increases in that obviously will be something that we have to take into account. But to Pinky's point, we are looking for ways to mitigate that.
So to be clear, the increase includes the tariff?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question, the presentation slides talked about needing provisions to cover unpredictable costs. Are those unpredictable costs within the renewal provision and might cost us more than what the increase is?
Sorry about that. The unpredictable costs that we have, that would be, I mean, right now we're talking about an extension of the existing contract. As I said, we're talking about, potentially a water, sewer, trash in the out years. That PI language I talked about kind of goes by the wayside because we're talking about a 15% this year and a 15% by next year. But I think you could expect that if we were able to negotiate a contract in that, at the end of that second year, that we would likely put in there a provision that changes the PI language to something like a water, sewer, trash, and that would allow us to come back to the district to discuss out of the ordinary increases without, blanketly, giving us permission to increase rates, but giving us the opportunity to come and present that to the district to offset these really big increases that you may have at the end of the term of the contract. If that makes sense. But right now, the contract is what it is, with just the exception of extending for 2 years with 2 15% increases.
Thank you.
If that were the option you chose to take.
Thank you. I'm going to call on our CAO, and then I have a question. You're good? Okay. So my question is, with the Resource Recovery Center now starting up and running, in say 2 years' time, the amount of our solid waste is reduced because of, the recovery process. You said you collect 7,200 tons from us now. If that number goes down, is that going to mean a price increase because of having less material?
No, we don't base our models on a guaranteed rate. It's one of the nice parts about being part of a larger firm. We basically guarantee the rates that we're proposing there for the volume you send us, with no expectation on how much volume that is. That covers our costs to do that very complicated movement that Pinky was talking about, where you go and you barge, then you truck, and then you rail the system. So you will have control over kind of that first stage of that, but our rates cover the rail as well as the disposal. And we break that down into a per container basis so that you don't have to have that concern that, hey, if you are able to actually divert more, you won't be in a situation where you're paying for fixed costs, therefore pushing your rates up. So you should be comfortable there.
Okay, thank you. That alleviates my concern. Are there any further questions for directors? Seeing no, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe you can help me with some clarification. Director Elliott asked about tariffs. I heard in your presentation that there's an existing tariff. There's been a lot of talk, of course, in Canada about new tariffs. Would those new tariffs, if they go 25% or 50% or who knows what governments do, would that affect the price as well? Would that be kind of like one of those unforeseen things? So if a new tariff comes in, would that affect our contracted price, or would our price stay the same?
If there is a tariff change or change in law, is what I think you're referring to, which typically most of our contracts will govern that does provide us an opportunity to come in and talk with the district again to say, hey, listen, this is nothing through our doing, but it may be an impact. Now that if that occurs over the next 2 years. The tariff we talked about, because that was a change, right? It went from, I believe, 0 to I think it's just over $2 per ton. Pinky, correct me if I'm mistaken there. But that was a change, and had the contract not been ending, we would likely have come back to the district to talk about that. So that's a fair question in terms of what would happen if those tariffs continue to go up, because I would suspect that we would need to come back to you and talk to you about that. But we don't anticipate anything in the next 2 years, but that is a fair question to ask, and I hope you would all understand why we would come back and ask to recover that.
Okay.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I have several. My next question is: Are these prices in U.S. dollars or in Canadian dollars? And would the exchange rate affect that?
They are in U.S. dollars at this point. And that is where, when we talked about some more flexibility as we increase the size of our company in Canada, that may provide us the opportunity to be more flexible. Currently, all of our work in Vancouver, BC is in U.S. dollars, because we don't really have personnel or assets or other things up in that area. We do in Ottawa and others where we're able to take Canadian dollars on that side of the market, but we're not able to take Canadian dollars on this side of the market. But we are hoping to change that in the next couple of years, which is one of those things I alluded to, that if we're successful in our attempts, may provide us a little bit more flexibility if we were to negotiate a contract in 2 years.
Thank you. Now, just a minute, Director Gisborne, we've gone over the time limit. So is there consensus among the board that we continue the dialogue with the delegation? Are we okay with that? All right. I'm seeing positive nods. Go ahead, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, last question. Sorry about that. I see that there's an option for a 15% increase this year and then a 15% increase next year, or we can go with like the 26% right now, and then that applies for 2 years. That 15% increase next year, would that be like a compounding increase? Like $100 becomes $115 and then multiplied by another 15%?
Yes, that's, and the reason why it's, when we say in year 1, it's a 26% increase, but if there were a 2-year, you would normally have your normal cost of increase that would occur in that year 2. So that second 15% increase is what we're trying to do, is to capture that increase in that year of our costs. So that's why it's a little bit more for a 2-year option versus the 1-year option at 26%, if that makes sense.
Okay, so.
But yes, it is compounding like all PI languages.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And that's all the questions from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. Anyone who hasn't asked a question yet? Seeing no hands, Director Elliott.
Just to clarify, then, if the 1-year option at 26%, at the end of that 1 year, would there then be another offer for 1 year, or would you be looking to change your whole model in 1 year?
Yeah, that's obviously up to the district's decision whether or not you want to solicit additional bids. I think in some of Pinky's I know in some of Pinky's conversations with your team members, there was a concern about timing of going out and soliciting new options and new bids. That's why we kind of offered up a different alternative to give the district some time to look at options. We're hoping that option would be us. But obviously, if you chose the 1-year decision to go up 26%, that means it would expedite the district's need to go out and look for other alternatives. we would love to still be considered. We would hope that we could still negotiate something, but we know you're going to have to do your due diligence to make sure you find the best opportunity for yourselves.
Thank you. Seeing no further hands up for questions, I want to thank you both very much for your presentation. And it's been really informative, and I know that we'll be making a good decision based on your information. So thank you again.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. Directors, we have no unfinished business. Under correspondence, item 6.1 is the in-camera meeting. So that leaves 3 items of correspondence. Is there any business arising from this course?
I guess I just want to mention that item 6.2, Jasmine Stotz, I have responded to her concerns.
Thank you. Director Lennox.
And just making sure 6.3, the request from the MLA has been handled or dealt with, or if we need to take action.
Corporate officer, the request for the meeting with our MLA, is that well in hand? I know there was this question as to whether we could attend on a specific.
It does say, please let us know.
Do know that a staff member is currently working on this item.
Okay.
Okay, as long as you're working.
I'm fair. I'm
fair. That's good.
Thanks.
CEO.
Chair, yes, we do have a staff member working on it, but I encourage all of you to respond with a yay or a nay or a preferable date. Because I think we've only got 2 or 3 responses so far.
Okay.
So we can't do nothing unless you guys tell us what's going on.
So why don't we pull it and see if we can do that?
Are you wishing to pull that item?
Let's do that. It's important, I think. Yeah.
All right, so item 6.3 has now been pulled and it will become 7.1. Is there any further business arising? Seeing no hands. Oh, sorry, Director Southcott.
Yeah, question with regard to 6.2. I would move to pull that as well if there's any update, and I probably it'd be for me more than anybody else here because I'm new at this table.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So 6.2 now becomes 7.2. All right. Yeah, so we can move on to business arising. And item 7.1 is the former item 6.3 regarding our meeting with our new MLA. Director Southcott.
Just a point of information. There was a request to the city from Tracey Bellmane as well for the same date. So I expect that the MLA is going to be here and meet with available at that time in local government.
All right.
Just
You respond
we
to that,
know.
Director.
Yeah.
Okay, good information. Director Lennox.
Thanks, Chair. Another sort of point of information. I know all of us are interested in meeting with our MLA, and I did manage to talk to her assistant recently, and this will be our opportunity. So to the CAO's point earlier that we need to take advantage of it because with the cabinet position, her assistant said she will be scheduled to be in Powell River 2 half days per month, and that's scheduled. So we need to take advantage of our opportunity. Thanks.
Thanks, Director. Good thing to keep in mind. Right, CAO.
Find out from the members who's available or who wants to attend that meeting so we can strike up a date with her.
Okay, so I think that was January the 7th.
What was that?
After 12 o'clock. So Director Elliott.
I believe that works for me just fine.
Pardon?
I think it works for me just fine.
Anyone else?
I'll make it work.
Okay, is anyone who it won't work for? I know I indicated in my response that 12:30 would be a preferred start time because and actually they're changing the ferry schedule. So now I don't know what time to suggest. Probably 1 o'clock would be better because it's now a half an hour later than before. Director Fall.
Thank you. So don't work around my schedule. I mean, I'd love to meet the MLA. I probably won't be able to come up that day, but we have our own MLA, like everything Iliskidi is a little bit unusual. So our MLAs, I'll try to arrange a separate meeting with our MLA at one point. And I'd love to meet your MLA. And I think it's our collective MLAs for the regional district. We got 2. So if there's a virtual option, that'd be great. I would join. But if not, I would be happy to hear reports back and maybe get another opportunity in the future.
Thanks, Director Fall. And I think staff are aware of the need for a virtual option. CAO.
We get a motion to set up that
Yes, so moved, yeah.
Okay, and the motion is to set up a meeting with MLA Neill on January the 7th with an option for remote attendance. Is that what you're moving?
That sounds perfect.
Okay, and seconded by Director Gisborne. Discussion on that motion, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, we haven't set our meeting schedule yet for 2025. And I taking a look, there's a number of options available that we'll be discussing later today. And a number of them actually have meetings set for the 7th as well. So option 5, which is the consensus option, has finance at 1 and regional board at 4. So maybe we could invite the MLA to attend our meeting.
Thank you, Corporate Officer.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that I hadn't noted that I was going to bring the original board when we discussed that. So we could potentially slot that meeting on a different time or day.
I'm sure staff will make it work. Director Lennox.
Thanks, Chair. Just regarding the meeting and the motion, it occurs to me that we should arrive prepared as we do at UBCM and other meetings with a bit of an agenda and then who's talking and sort of not overwhelm our MLA. So just my suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So we're now on to 7.2, which is the former 6.2. And Director Southcott, you asked to pull this, so do you want to begin?
Yeah, thank you. Just wondering if there's any update on it's been a long time since I've been involved in the meetings that we used to have with Modi, either quarterly or 2 or 3 times a year, and this topic came up a number of times. So maybe it's just only for me, but is there anything happening as far as
Okay, let's go to Director Brander and hopefully he'll have some answers.
Well, answers, I can bring him up to date a little bit, but we spoke to Modi about this and other issues as well. And earlier this year, I can't remember if it was late spring or early summer, they did send a consultant up here to at least look at the bridge structure and assess it for safety issues, and also just to look at it to see if it would actually accommodate pedestrian bridges. Ever since that happened, I haven't heard anything. So I guess they reported back to Ministry of Transportation, and hopefully we'll hear something from them eventually. It'd be a nice thing to ask them, should we have another meeting?
Yes, and I tend to agree. I miss having those meetings. It was really good to touch base with Modi on a quarterly basis. So we might even want to consider a motion asking them to reinstate those meetings. Director Gisborne?
You took the words right out of my mouth. The quarterly meetings with Ministry of Transportation I found to be very helpful. I know there were some challenges related to the expectations. I would be very much in favor of even putting forward a motion to get those meetings going again. It also makes me wonder, maybe their hesitancy is like a lack of a terms of reference or maybe some formal structure. I'm not sure, looking at our staff, should we do the motion now off the floor, or should we do like a notice of motion into the new year? Because I guess whatever we do, Modi's not going to be quick to jump to our request either way.
Thank you, Chair. Well, a notice of motion is appropriate. We could have that considered at the January Committee of the Whole.
All right.
Let's do that. I'll do a notice of motion of meeting with Modi quarterly. West. My word's no good today. Sorry.
It's okay. It's just a notice of motion. Yeah. It isn't voting on anything. Lennox.
Sorry. And the other thing I wanted to kind of point out is Electoral Area B, we got a pedestrian bridge over Myrtle Creek a number of years ago, and a big part of that was joint funding, I believe, from Modi and joint funding from the regional district through our community works funds. I know Lion Creek would be a much bigger, more expensive project, but without those community works funds, which is something that we have talked about, it's going to be, I think, much harder to get a pedestrian bridge down there if we were to be a funding partner, because without community works funds, there's not really anywhere else to get the money from. We don't have a service to really take the money from. So hopefully we still have community works funds to spend money on a bridge out south.
Well, I know all of our areas have needs for community works funds, and I recall Area B, there was significant money spent on the bike path, or active transportation corridor. So, that's, thanks, good information. So you've given your notice of motion, Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, Jude. I'm just in support of the effort that we just discussed, but in the correspondence here, there has been a lot of work by the director and also at UBCM, so Director Southcott, that we've been advocating to support this in several different ways. And I think, I'd see if there's any appetite for the director to send a specific response letter reminding Mott, it's Mott now, it's not Moti, I've been reminded of that, about the safety issues. Really, if we focus on what's really unsafe in our areas and some of the funding that might be available through Mott that they've mentioned, maybe we can get some traction. So I'm willing to support any efforts that way as well to keep this on the fire. And again, back to the MLA's assistant, seems very aware of the current issues in our area as regards to roads and other things. So again, just some feedback on awareness there. So
Thanks, Director Lennox.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion regarding 7.2, we can now move on to reports. Item 8.1, which is the extension of the Republic Services contract. So there is a motion in the agenda. Is there a mover for this recommendation? Brander, thank you. Seconded by, I'll second it. Thank you. So discussion. Director Gisborne.
We're looking at the 15% per year compounding interest is the motion that we have. Yeah, I kind of did the napkin math. And, you start with $100, increase by 15%, and then another increase of 15%. That $100 over 2 years would be $247, whereas if you do a 26% increase right now, and then that stays next year, works out to $252. So it's kind of interesting that this option actually results in a bit less of a payment. However, after 2 years, what our contract would actually be higher. So when we go to renew, I think that's going to be a challenge, 2 years from now. But if what we heard is, that we're having like a standardized rate in 2 years, then I don't think that would really matter. So I guess this is, it's a tough pill to swallow. We hear that this is in US dollars. When this all started in 2012, our dollar exchange rate was about 1-to-1. Now it's about 70-to-1. It's not easy, and I'm really kind of struggling because yes, we have a new waste transfer station and a new resource recovery center, but this is still the fundamental problem at its core, which is what do we do with our garbage? And this has been a discussion for 30 years. And it goes all the way back to what I think in the 90s when there was a referendum about incineration. And I know that there's the second motion, and I would like to talk about incineration when we get to the next motion. But this is what we got to do for now. I know there's other options potentially in the future, but come January 1st, we have to send our garbage somewhere. So we're between a rock and a hard place.
I hear you. Okay, I've got Director Lennox and Director Fall.
thanks, Chair. These ones that come along and smack us seemingly on a regular basis when we're planning our financial plans, they really, it's a gut blow, right? So I'm learning how that goes as we progress through our terms. I guess one of the questions I have is for maybe Mr. Covenhoven. Can you explain the subtleties of the overage in tonnage? We didn't really ask Republic about that, but I see there's a stand, you see we're in the report and in their presentation. How often are we going over that container maximum and then getting into overage, or do we pay that at all right now? Is that something new for us? Can you explain?
Yes.
Mr. Covenhoven?
Thank you, through the chair. So the overage limit there is at 28 tons, and that's just to align us with safe transportation and safe shipping weights on those containers. We try and get as close as we can all the time because that does maximize the value we get from shipping. So it's quite rare. We would never send a container that is over that weight limit from our facility. But due to weather, it could pick up some water from rain
Yeah.
while in transit. The opposite of that is true. It may dry out on the way through transport. So there's a lot of mileage between here and Roosevelt, Washington. But again, we try and get that to land right on the target just to maximize efficiency.
I guess my question is, do you see that those differences in the two options, because there's a tonnage difference, do you see that being a major impact on us if we happen to go over on, you know, it rained for 2 months straight, which it seems like it wants to?
What's going on?
Through the chair, no, I do not see that being a big impact. That is a very, very small component of our costs so far.
Thank you.
Thanks, Director Lennox. Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. One, I'll ask them separately because they're quite diverse. First follows up a bit on what Director Gisborne said, and I also did a bit of math on the back of my, well, in an Excel spreadsheet. But I want to ask Mr. Cohenhoven through the chair, if I could, for his thoughts on this. So what we heard from the presentation is that the 1 year 26% increase would, you know, if it got renewed after, would there be an additional at least annual increase, and that the 15% over 2 years has that built in. And I don't know what that would be, but you know, 3 to 5%. Something like that. I don't really know. Maybe Mr. Cohenhoven can help with that. But I also concluded what Director Gisborne said, which is actually when you do the math, in the short term, the 15% over 2 years would result in less, but it would end up at a higher rate overall. It's kind of like one of these escalating GICs or something. It looks good, but you know, so you get a lower, but it would over time, you know, if that was projected at the same rate for the next 10 years or something over the long run, it would be higher because it would end up at a rate. Now, that would be negotiated, as Director Gisborne pointed out, and we don't know what that would be, but prices don't tend to go down. So is that an issue, or does it wash out? I'd just like to hear from from Mr. Cohenhoven, if he could help us understand the implications if they are significant.
Thank you. Good question, Mr. Cohenhoven.
Thank you, through the chair. So also doing the math, I do agree that the stepped 2 year 15% increases work out a little bit better for us in the short term. When you're looking at these numbers, there's a couple other factors to consider, and it was touched on that we are working to reduce our waste volume. So there may be a variable here in just the amount of waste that we're sending, the number of containers we're sending, as well as the US Canadian exchange rate. Putting everything in a neat little box and just assuming those things stay the same, we, again, based on our volume right now, we work out to about $50,000 to $60,000 Canadian difference between the two options. So when we're looking at $1 million a year, it really comes down to, when do we want to spend that money? Do we want to spend it and see that increase all next year, or do we want to spread it out over 2 years? The difference between the two options really isn't that great compared to the entire contract.
Thank you, and that helps a lot. I was also kind of thinking it's a difference. It adds up over time, but then there's a lot of future uncertainty. Actually, I realized, Chair, my second question is related to the second motion, so I will end it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on motion number 1?
Yeah, thank you.
On list time.
So this is a question that may be a little bit out of simple accounting, but I've been watching prices and studying economics for a lot longer than I've been sitting at a governance or local government table. And one thing that I've noticed, which is fairly common, apparently, I've noticed among, you know, in the circle of economics, is that volatility is increasing. So from that standpoint, I just wonder if Mr. Cohenhoven also has looked at that, because that would tend to encourage me to go for the 2-year option. Another reason is that I'm a little surprised, frankly, that Republic didn't was using, or states that they were using, CPI index. I think that many of us realize that CPI is not the cost increases for many years have been greater than that for local government. And I'm surprised that it isn't the same case for an industry like them, because energy is not generally included in CPI, and that they would be an energy intensive industry in various ways. So very similar to local government. So, but getting back to the real question is volatility and other factors like that. What's the feeling from an accounting standpoint on those factors?
Mr. Honam,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you through the chair. I wish I had a crystal ball to predict the future. I can tell you what I've seen happening in the past, and that is pre-2020, we saw these indexes coming in right around 2%. And then there was the volatility through 2020 and 2021 that has pushed these indexes up into the 4 and 5% range quite steadily for the last 4 years. So in Canada, we are seeing inflation slow down a little bit, and we are seeing those indexes come down in rate. But that doesn't necessarily reflect what we're seeing in the US markets. And so another important distinction here is that we are talking about a US index. So that is a different political structure. That's a different series of events that are going to drive those indexes. Right now, today, we're seeing that index. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's lower than it was in previous years. So I think it was around 3.5%. And I'm hoping we see that trend continue. There just are a lot of variables. So in the moment, the index is lower than it's been in previous years, but we're not at the lowest point. So again, difficult to predict the future there.
Thank you. Director Fall, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. It was actually not my question. That was, wasn't that?
All right, Director Southcott.
It did answer a question, but Director Southcott.
And Elliot, you are next.
Okay, thank you. I think I got skipped somehow, but anyway. So first of all, I wanted to make a comment on Director Gisborne's thoughts around the math. So what we're dealing with is 26% increase for a 1 year and an undetermined increase for a second year, not staying the same. There's no guarantee that they wouldn't come back with some other increase for that second year. Just to correct you on your assumptions, because that wasn't part of the deal. So I am in favor of the predictable 15% over 2 years, because we're unlikely to come up with another option that is transferring to some other way of dealing with our solid waste within 1 year. We probably need more time than that. And the uncertainty of what would happen for the second year, I don't know is best for us. So that's my preferred thing. My question, I guess, is, do we know comparable costs of BC facilities, or if there's even a possibility to switch at any kind of a quick turnaround?
Mr. Conover.
Thank you through the chair. It is quite easy to look up the tipping fees for other facilities, other landfills in BC or the States. Those are usually published publicly. The unknown is in the transportation logistics. So that plays a very big part of our cost. Transportation is about 2/3 of the cost of our waste management here. So that's where we sort of have to narrow our scope and figure out where we want to go, and then go out for pricing on transportation. It is a little bit more difficult in BC. There's a few items in the report here that just get into the capacity of other landfills, and that plays into their willingness to accept our material. We don't have a lot of options, but in the few events and the few calls that I have made, it's not a hard no. We would just need to dig in a little deeper and get a little more serious in our talks.
Yeah. So if we're just looking for a temporary solution for 2 years, is there potential to switch service provider to, say, Cache Creek, as you mentioned in the report, and save money, or you're just not sure whether it does or doesn't?
Oh, no.
Through the chair, in short, we're just not sure if that would actually save us money right now.
Clearly, there's a number of uncertainty. CAO?
The chair, and in fairness to staff, we just haven't been tasked with that.
I just want to know the
Do it yet. And if I may, Chair, you may have all also seen this AVICC news release, which is talking about the capacities on Vancouver Island of the landfills and their reach out to the ministry to start to help out in that regard, especially on the emergency management side of it. Because when there's an emergency and everything's flooded, contaminated, etc., it all gets sent to the nearest landfill, which then just hoops them up and drowns them in old garbage and nuisance and everything like that.
Thank you. Were there further questions? We're on motion number 1 on the agenda, so no further discussion. I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimous. Now we're on to recommendation number 2. Is there a mover for this recommendation? Director Elliott, Director Sanders. Second, discussion. Okay, Director Elliott, then Director Gisborne.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions and some thoughts. My question is, does our solid waste management plan have any restrictions on the types of exploration we can do? Are we restricted in any way?
Restrictions?
Thank you through the chair. I would need to look into that and get back to you. I don't have that answer right this moment.
Okay, so then my thoughts are, ideally we explore options for dealing with our own solid waste locally through partnerships or what have you. And so I'm very much in favor of exploring those types of options. My curiosity around whether our solid waste management plan restricts us from, say, incinerators or anything like that, kind of matters. So hopefully we get that answer back, and I guess that's part of the exploration.
Good point. Thank you. Director Gisborne.
Yes, so I do believe myself and Director Elliott are the recent appointees to the Solid Waste Management Plan Monitoring Advisory Committee, or something like that. I'm sorry, I butchered the name. Would looking at alternatives for the transport of municipal solid waste be something that could be handled by that committee to kind of do more deep dive into, the various options, or are they very restrictive on what they can look at?
Okay, so we're probably asking about the terms of reference then to that. Mr. Cohen, do you have an answer for that?
Thank you through the chair. I will try and then request other staff add to that if necessary. The Solid Waste Management Plan Advisory Committee is an advisory committee, so making sort of an operational task for them would not be in line with the terms of reference. Certainly research and advice could come back to the board, and they could make recommendations that the board can use. That's my understanding of how that would work.
Good one.
Thank you. So the issue of municipal solid waste in this region has been an issue in my area since I was a little kid. And as many of you know, my father was a director and he was chair of the solid waste committee. And I remember being a little kid and hearing all the conversations around the table and at school around landfills and incinerators. And I think there was a referendum back in the 90s. Of course, I was like 10 years old, so I didn't really pay attention. But here we are, you know, I'm almost 40, and it's like the same issue, the same problem. And the frustration I've had with how we as a regional district have been dealing with municipal solid waste is we didn't get a landfill, we didn't get an incinerator. The choice was, let's ship it to Washington State. Now, we've just dealt with, you know, this kind of short-term contract. There's big expenses, they're in US dollars. And I really I'm not putting any staff or anything on the spot. It's like, it's the board and the political atmosphere in the community has been, you know, going with an incinerator or going with a landfill is an unpopular thing. And as a result, I think a lot of the politicians in the community have kind of just kicked the can down the road, and it's like, well, we'll get to it eventually. Well, now the lack of, you know, making a decision on what we do with our garbage is now coming home to roost with huge costs. And I think it's really time for our board to take this issue seriously, because, you know, we're hearing about proposed 25% tariffs in the States, and, you know, the exchange rate is becoming an issue. Cache Creek might be an option, but, you know, they also have issues as well. I believe the Thompson-Nicola Regional District just took it over from the private operator or something like that. But we might actually want to really consider, you know, waste to energy or incineration here locally as a way of, you know, actually even bringing some revenue in, because what we're seeing is other local governments and regional districts on Vancouver Island are running into the same problem. Vancouver is also running into the same issue of like, hey, we all want to get to zero waste, but for some reason, the amount of municipal solid waste keeps going up. And that's the reality. We want to have zero waste, but the reality is we have waste. And it's costing us a lot of money, and it's going to keep costing us money. Like the price isn't going to go down. I don't expect to ever see, you know, Republic Services come back and say, you know what, you're getting a 20% discount this year. That's, you know, hope for the best, plan for the worst. So I'm in favor of this motion for our staff to take a look at these alternatives, but I would like to include, you know, local incineration as one of those options. And I know that's going to get a lot of environmentalists mad at me, but at the same time, we have costs, we have an issue, we have to deal with it, and we keep exporting the problem. So, and I would also like the Solid Waste Management Plan Monitoring Committee to at least be open to that kind of option and that discussion, where they can kind of maybe dig into, you know, some of the realities on the ground. It's a frustrating thing, but it's also kind of wild that in the back of my head, it's like I've been hearing about this problem my entire life. In this community.
Well, and we're all hearing about it, and we're going to hear a lot more, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to kind of add on to the sentiment that appreciate the options that are laid out. I think what you're hearing from some of us, at least, is we want to see all of the options. It is a new time now. It's new leadership now. We have to be mature enough. I hate that we send our garbage down all the way down there. Like it's embarrassing. And so I'd like to explore, we're in a new era in time. We see the pressures that we're up against. Again, Director Gisborne said, you know, what are the ideas? What are the options? We'll probably throw most of them away. But I think it's time to talk to our people about our waste we're creating and we're sending to another country and putting in the ground and pretending like we're dealing with it. So thanks.
And the alternative to that, of course, is dealing with it ourselves,
Right.
In which case that opens up another kettle of issues. Like, are we going to put it next to you or next to you in area B? I mean, where do you
explore it?
You know, and can it be done at a pollution-free, you know, waste to incineration, waste to energy?
Exactly.
What is the pollution level resulting from that? So these are all things that I think staff have heard, you know, all of it loud and clear. So I can trust that this will be included in their further examination. Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I have a comment and a question. First, a comment on expectations. I fully support this recommendation. I think it's really good that we look into options, but I do think we need to temper any expectations that there's an easy solution. Dealing with waste is expensive. Like it might be tempting to think that not shipping it so far and having a local landfill would be a less costly solution. I would actually not want to, I'll pour some cold water on that. That is very unlikely in my view. There's a reason why they're hard to open. There's a reason why the Lasqueti landfill, which operated for many years for very low cost, had to be closed. That was because the Ministry of Environment told us we had to close it. So it's expensive. And then for the cost of 200,000 to monitor it over the next 25 years. So just closing a landfill is expensive, as we saw with the RRC. So I think, in incinerators, I mean, the rules you'd have to follow, like maybe that would be seemingly inexpensive. I would actually hazard a guess that maybe the cost of shipping waste to Eastern Washington or Central BC would be minor in comparison to building something like that. I mean, we already have a major cost with the RRC. I think opening up one of these facilities could be very costly, but I'm open to looking into it. I think it would be great to have the information, even if it's to put things in context with what we already have and what we're doing and the options. There's another reason why, even though it's far away, and I'm also, sickened by waste traveling 600 kilometers. I mean, you can do that as using as much electricity or other less impactful fuels as possible. But nonetheless, that's a long way to send garbage. But there's a reason in dry areas. There's a reason why those landfills remain open, because they're dry. Dry areas are much more appropriate for landfills, and they're easier to get permits. So, I think, the Cache Creek one may be an option. I think it's useful to look at. So I think all options, should be looked at. That's our due diligence. We need to be open to it. But I think for the public, we need to really be cautious at any expectation management of, there aren't any easy solutions. I wouldn't say that shipping it to Eastern Washington is kicking it down the road. That is an option. That is a solution. It's the one we've chosen. Is it viable to do something else? I don't know. But the question I have through the chair, if I might, is related to Lasqueti Island. So just to ensure and maybe hear from our manager, from Mr. Cohenhoven, if this exploration of options would also apply to Lasqueti Island, because it's right now the contract brings the waste up to Powell River from Lasqueti at a fairly high cost, and then joins the stream. But we have also the option from Lasqueti, the permission to ship it to the landfill in Cedar. And because we're such a small amount of waste, they despite what the CAO said about being overwhelmed, I don't think they're that worried about it. But that's, would that be part of this, looking at alternate options? We've previously had barges that bring that over that way, and containers and so on. So just in terms of the getting options on the table, is that would that be covered by this motion?
Thank you. Through the chair, we certainly could bring those options forward in the same report. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I certainly would, encourage the committees. I mean, there's the Lasqueti one. There's also the one on the mainland for the rest of the regional district. I really think those people, their volunteerism and their ability to look into doing some of the research would be really, really helpful. That might help reduce the burden on staff. Help with the leverage. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I've got directors. I've got then Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Is carbon costing included, or is there an intention to include it? And has it been included in like this recently?
Mr. Cohen.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I don't have that answer. I would have to follow up with that as well.
Director Elliott, then Director Gisborne.
Thank you. So I just wanted to speak a little bit in support of some of Director Fall's points around landfills. So currently in our region, in our city, we have a number of landfills that have not been properly environmentally closed, and that sits on our book as obligations that have a sort of an undetermined cost to them without really reserves to pay for that, because reserves were not set aside at the time because it was thought that once it's buried, it's good and you're done. But that isn't actually the case. So presumably any landfill options that we have in the future would include costs for closing. And landfills in general are not really a long-term sustainable option because eventually you run out of space. So my thinking is we're looking, if we really want to stop having to deal with needing to find new solutions for our solid waste, we need to look at sustainable options that exist in the long term that are also environmentally feasible. And getting to zero waste is usually easier if you're processing your own garbage, because as new technology comes available to recycle, reuse, or redirect, you can implement it easier. That transfer station is an awesome facility because we can change what we're doing easily through the transfer station. So happy the transfer station's there. I don't expect landfill to be a long-term solution for our contained region because of terrain, water, all kinds of reasons, and also because the amount of pressure it puts on our future to environmentally close them is kind of an undetermined amount of money, because it's very difficult to predict what things are going to cost in the future. And so, I mean, we can try to plan for it, but generally speaking, it seems we're always short of money to do things properly, to close things at the end. And it doesn't seem to matter if it's government or private. There's that same issue of environmental responsibility when the site closes. And we still carry a bunch of that. And so I wanted people to be aware of that. I want to explore all the options. I like options that are not going to run out of space and time and create an obligation in the future for environmental regulations. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Director Elliott. That's a good one.
Yes, sorry. We've been having some discussion around landfills, and I want to clarify that there's different types of landfills. So we're talking about municipal solid waste. If incineration was something that was pursued, you still need to put the fly ash somewhere, and that doesn't really fall under the same category as like municipal solid waste. It's usually considered as like a form of toxic waste. As I'm aware, there is already one toxic waste landfill in the community up in Wildwood that used to deal with all the mill's fly ash, but the mill is no longer operating. With the closure of the mill, it also brings up an issue that we've had at this board related to other landfills. I believe there's one in Stillwater and Dixon where there's wood waste that is now going and being landfilled because the mill is no longer taking, the wood waste. And then there was another one that was proposed up north of town, and that created a lot of controversy about, taking a lot of this extra wood waste and just burying it. Whereas if we did have something that was like waste to energy, we could receive that material and turn that into power and heat. We could use it to, heat homes or recreation complexes. This is still very preliminary, but I just want everyone to be aware that there are different types of landfills. The advantage to the incineration landfill is while it is more hazardous, it is a much smaller volume, and you do need to have like liners to keep it safe, to keep it from water intrusion. The big challenge that we had when discussing landfills in our region many, many years ago is it rains all the time. So if you put a liner in the bottom of your landfill, put a bunch of garbage into it, the thing turns into a pond very quickly. And that was one of the reasons why landfills of just regular garbage many years ago was essentially turned down, because Cache Creek is nice. It hardly rains. Here, it hardly ever stops raining. Today is one of those days it seems to be sunny, but I just wanted to point that out, that if we were to look into the incineration model, we could not just be looking at our own municipal solid waste. We could be looking at the wood landfills that are popping up in our region as another source, because I'm not even going to call the old incinerator an incinerator, because it wasn't. It was a pit burner. It was essentially a hole in the ground that people threw garbage in and lit it on fire. So when we talk about modern incinerations, you can't, like, the old incinerator would never be approved in this day and age. So anyone that's watching, those are two different things, and the modern incinerators have very stringent emission controls. You know, you can't just throw car batteries and all kinds of things into it like they used to back in, you know, the 70s. So before anyone gets all upset, this is very preliminary, but I want us to be looking at all the options, wood waste, our own municipal solid waste. And when you get into things like economies of scale, like you might have to build a larger facility, we might actually be seen as a destination for other regional districts because yes, capital expenses are big, but operational expenses are also really what kind of gets you in the long run. And if we started having stuff coming in from other regions, that actually might reduce the operational expense, even though we might have a higher capital expense, if that makes sense. So this might be an opportunity for us to stop hemorrhaging money and maybe bring some revenue into the community.
Thanks, Director Gisborne, and I guess that's why we're looking, you know, staff to explore all directions. That's why the motion is there. There is further discussion on this. Seeing no hands, call for the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. Item 8.2. Gratefully, I would ask for a mover for this recommendation, Director Randene, seconded by Director Lennox. If I put myself first on the speakers list, I'm really disheartened by BC Hydro coming here and inviting us to apply for, you know, electric vehicle charging stations and then turning around and saying your application cannot be accepted. So it's not like we even put our application in to get into the queue. They're simply not accepting it. So I'm a bit distressed with the kind of doublespeak that we got from BC Hydro. However, that is the case, and I do support putting it in advance for a year and then seeing if we can get a better result next year. And if we don't, then the board at that time can consider whether or not we want to take this on. Director Lennox?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was also disappointed to read this after the quite a good presentation and some kind of positive energy. And it's quite clear that BC Hydro has told us they're not prepared to subsidize the EV charging at all in any way. And it's all they want to cost recover everything. So when you made your motion and we supported that and I didn't for Lund, I thought, oh, maybe this will be a great example. I can learn how to get this done properly. And then lo and behold, so I'm very disappointed as well. Just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, thanks, Director Lennox. And actually, Lund may have an advantage in that you're not an island.
Right. Yeah. It's all about the
Lund.
numbers, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Further discussion on the motion. Director Fall.
Just briefly, I mean, I'll also concur with the disappointment. And as you know, I got excited at that presentation. I thought, oh, well, geez, this would be great. And maybe French Creek, you know, maybe vehicles for Lasky, you know, there seemed to be options. The BC Hydro seemed to be wanting to roll these out and looking for sites. And now it's like, no, too small, go away. So it's you know, kind of disappointing, but I agree with the motion. I think that we wait and then maybe in a year, there'll be a change of heart on their part. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Ball. Director Gisborne, then Director Elliott.
Yeah, my disappointment is very high. And when the individual came in and gave the presentation and then we directed our staff, you know, that takes time, that takes money. These meetings cost money to run. And I would just think in the future that if BC Hydro is going to come in and blow smoke, don't waste our time. Like, I'm really freaking irritated about that. Is it to just come in, we get all our hopes up. And so next time they come in, they better actually be willing to stick to their word, because I'm biting my tongue.
Probably a good idea. Director Elliott.
I wouldn't mind writing them a letter, asking them to create a remote area strategy, so they could put us on a list of islands and remote communities on a list of folks that maybe don't meet their criteria, and then create a strategy for dealing with them over the next 5 to 10 years, so that they're adding those communities into their strategies in some way, shape, or form. The suggestion being, because communities are remote or islands or whatever, they're never going to meet their criteria for prioritization. And so could we just hive them off and have a separate strategy for those places?
That is a really good question. Are you making that as a motion?
I'm just adding that to my comment around the motion in general, that we could also write a letter that proposes a solution instead of just being disappointed.
Okay. Well, why don't we deal with the motion on the table and then we'll follow that up with a secondary motion. Is there further discussion on this item on the table? Director Southcott.
Just a question. and I did read the report. Maybe I missed this. My understanding is that BC Hydro basically offers level 1 charging stations and not level 2. Is that the case? Because it seems to me, after looking into this for years ago with the city, that level 2s are a whole lot cheaper. And also, that's what we got first, a number of them within the city before BC Hydro did. It was a level 2 at the parking lot across the road from the ferry terminal down here. So is that the only option? Forgive me if I missed that in the report.
Sure, thank you. We'll turn perhaps to Mr. Devereaux, who is with us. And do you have that information, Mr. Devereaux?
Through the chair, the price financial impact represented in the report extends to all of the various chargers. So they're not funding any of it. And the financial impact for the different types of chargers is why the huge price range in the financial impact.
Any question?
So the answer was just unequivocal, no level 1, no level 2. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Really?
I would move that our chair or our board, where we recommend to the board that we write a letter to BC Hydro suggesting that communities that are on our islands are severely remote that would never fall within their priorities have a separate strategy, which they can implement over a set amount of time.
Second.
And that we consider an AVICC resolution around this same topic.
Okay, so that's a two-part.
Do you want 2 motions?
Well,
Our CAO is
1 and 2, can we not?
Yeah, we could do 2. Also, there's going to be a call for resolution
Yeah,
shortly, so we could,
considering would put it in that.
so we could consider drafting a resolution for that when that call comes.
Okay, I'll make it a second motion. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion right now is to write a letter to BC Hydro asking for a remote community strategy for electric vehicle charging station.
Separate
from their urban priority. Right? Okay, so further discussion. Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Director Elliott.
I'll make another motion. That's the qathet Regional District consider a resolution to AVICC on this same topic for a separate strategy.
Thank you. Seconder for that motion, Director Gisborne. Discussion. Put myself on the discussion list just to say that I think we're not alone in terms of remote communities and wanting electric vehicle. This is not something that would have benefited the people on Texada Island, and so we can welcome and open our doors to welcoming visitors. And we're not the only community that's going through this, so I think that's a really great idea to forward this concept to AVICC. So my comment. Any further comments? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimous. There is no new business on our agenda, so we are at question period. Does anyone have a question for the committee?
Hi, Chair Galinsky from the Peak here. I don't have any questions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Anyone else? Okay, Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Board. One question regarding the waste disposal company's presentation. There was talk amongst the board afterwards about them using the consumer price index. And I thought that they actually had said that they use something else. I don't know if it was a producer price index or I don't actually think they use a consumer price index. And so was there did I hear a different CPI or a PPI? And I'm not sure if anybody else heard that.
Okay, Director.
Yeah, and I was gonna actually ask Mr. Covenhoven because I forgot to ask this discussion around WST pricing versus urban wage index pricing. Can we touch on that?
Mr. Covenhoven.
Thank you, through the chair. So again, the distinction is that We're not talking about the consumer price indexes that we use in Canada. So in the US, the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes their own consumer price index, and they fall into different categories. So the all urban consumers is one of the primary categories. But within that, there's a very large breakdown of different items. So they mentioned the all items, which would take every single index that's measured and lump them together. But very specific to us, we are talking about just the one line of the consumer price index for all urban consumers in the US, and that is the water sewer trash index.
WST.
WST. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Seeing no hands, let's move on to the proposed closed session. Would someone like to read?
I'm all prepared. I move that the committee move in camera, the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the board considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipal district. M, a matter that under another enactment is such that the public may be excluded from the meeting. And N, the consideration of whether a committee meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Thank you, seconded by Director Lennox. Discussion, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? We're going in count.
Sorry. I need a bathroom.
Yes, and I think there's going to be some food coming. We're going to let staff lay it out first. And
Six left.
Yesterday. Present for.
Recording in progress.
Meetings
Thank you,
24/7.
Chair. We're back in session.
Okay, if I can have everyone's attention, we are back in public session. We have no rise in reports, so our meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much.
Recording stopped.
Very good, everybody.
Meeting is